Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Jaiva Narottamam
Devim Saraswatim
Vyasam
Vyasam
Tato Jayam Udirayat.
For reciting the Srimad
Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances to the Godhead Narayan, and to Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, and to Salasas, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Yeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishiki. Rendering rendering service to the devotee, that is troublesome to the heart, is ultimately destroyed, and service to the personality of Godhead, who speaks the substance of songs, becomes irrevocable. Jnana-timirandasya jananjana shalakaya chakshurunmilitam jena tasmai shri gurave namaha. Born in the darkness of ignorance, spiritual master opened my eyes to the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So today we are reading from the 9th canto of the Bhagavatam, 2nd chapter. I think we're starting on text 17. 15? Oh, okay. Being reluctant to accept material enjoyment, Manu's youngest son, whose name was Kavi, gave up the kingdom before attaining full youth. Accompanied by his friends, he went to the forest, always thinking of the self-effulgent Supreme Personality of Godhead within the core of his heart. Thus he attained perfection.
From Karusha, another son of Manu, came the Karusha dynasty. A family of Kshatriyas, the Karusha Kshatriyas were the kings of the northern direction. They were celebrated protectors of Brahminical culture and were all firmly religious.
From the son of Manu named Drashta came a Kshatriya caste called Drashta, whose members achieved the position of Brahmanas in this world. Then from the son of Manu named Nriga came Sumati. From Sumati came Bhuta Jyoti, and from Bhuta Jyoti came Vasu.
The son of Vasu was Pratika, whose son was Ogavan. Ogavan's son was also known as Ogavan, and his daughter was Ogavati. Sudarshana married that daughter.
From Narasyanta came a son named Chitrasena, and from him a son named Raksa. From Raksa came Midvan. From Midvan came Purna, and from Purna came Indrasena.
From Indrasena came Vitihotra. From Vitihotra came Satyasrava, and from Satyasrava came the son named Urushrava, and from Urushrava came Devadatta.
From Devadatta came a son known as Agniveshya, who was the fire god Agni himself. His son, who was a celebrated saint, was well known as Karina and Jatukarnya.
O king, from Agniveshya came a Brahminical dynasty known as Agniveshyayana. Nagara described the descendants of Narshyanta. Let me describe the descendants of Disha. Please hear from me.
Disha had a son by the name Napaga. This Napaga, who was different from Napaga described later, becomes a Vishya by occupational duty. The son of Napaga was known as Bhalandana. The son of Bhalandana was Vatsaviti, and his son was Pramshu. Pramshu's son was Pramati. Pramati's son was Kanitra. Kanitra's son was Chakshusha, and his son was Vivimshati.
The son of Vivimshati was Ramba, whose son was the great and religious king Khani Netra. O king, the son of Khani Netra was King Karandama.
From Karandama came a son named Avikshit, and from Avikshit a son named Maruta, who was the emperor. The great mystic Samvarta, the son of Angida, engaged Maruta in performing the sacrifice Yajna.
The sacrificial paraphernalia of King Maruta was extremely beautiful.
for everything was made of gold. Indeed, no other sacrifice could compare to this.
In that sacrifice, King Indra became intoxicated by drinking a large quantity of somaras. The Brahmanas received ample contributions and therefore they were satisfied. For that sacrifice, the various demigods who controlled the winds offered foodstuffs, and the Vishwa Videvas were members of the assembly.
Maruta's son was Dama. Dama's son was Rajyavardhana. Rajyavardhana's son was Shudarti, and his son was Nara.
The son of Nara was Kevala, and his son was Duduman, whose son was Vegavan. Vegavan's son was Buddha, and Buddha's son was Trinabindu, who became the king of this earth.
The first of the Apsharas, the highly qualified girl named Alankusha, accepted the similarly qualified Trinabindu as her husband. She gave birth to a few sons and a daughter known as Elavna.
After the great saint Vishrava, the master of mystic yoga, received absolute knowledge from his father, he begot in the womb of Vila the greatly celebrated son known as Kubera, the giver of money.
Trinabindu had three sons named Vishal, Sonyabandhu, and Dhumraki. Among these three, Vishal created a dynasty and constructed a palace called Vaishali.
The son of Vishal was known as Hevachandra. His son was Dhumraksha, and his son was Samyama, whose sons were Devaja and Krishavasha.
The son of Krashva was Somadatta, who performed Ashwamedh sacrifices and thus satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu. By worshipping the Supreme Lord, he achieved the most exalted post, a residence on the planet to which great mystic yogis are elevated. The son of Somadatta was Sumati, whose son was Janamejaya. All these kings appearing in the dynasty of Vishala properly maintained the celebrated position of King Trinabandhu.
So we're going to discuss texts 23 and 24. Nabago drishta putronya Karmana vaishyatam gata Balandaha sutastasya Vatsa pritrir balandanat Vatsya prite sutapamshush Tatsutam pramatim vidu Kanitra pramates tashmak Chakshushota vivimshati. Go ahead.
Navagodista putronya
Navagodista putronya Karmana vaishyatam gata
Balandana sutastasya
Balandana sutastasya
Vasta pritrir balandanat
Vasta pritrir balandanat
Vatsa Pitre Sutastramsu
Vasta prite sutas pramsus
Tatsutam pramatim vidu.
Tatsutam pramatim vidu
Kanitra brahmatis tasmat
Kanitra pramates tasmach
Chakshushota vivimsati.
Chakshushota vivimshati.
These two books are Nabago Dista Putronya
Nabago dista putronya
Karmana vaishyatam gataha
Karmana vaishyatam gataha
Balandhana sutastasya
Balandana sutastasya
Vatsapriti balandana.
Vatsa pritir balandanat.
Vatsa priti sutatram sus.
Vatsa prite sutastram shush.
Tatsutam Brahmatim Vidu.
Tatsutam brahmatim vidu.
Kanitra Brahmatastasmat.
Kanita brahmates tasmach.
Chakshushota vivimshati.
Chakshushota vivimsati.
Nabhagotishta putro vanya.
Navagodishta putronya.
Karmana Vishyatanam Gata.
Karmana vaishyatam gata.
Balandana sutastasya.
Balandana sutastasya.
Vatsa priti balandata.
Vatsya pritir balandana.
Vatsa priti sutapram.
Vatsa prite sutapram sus.
Tatsutam Brahmatim Vidu.
Satsutam brahmatim vidu. Tra brahmates tasmat. Chakshusho bhagavadisati. Everybody's so expert here. All together. Drista. Oh, okay. I turned the page. I'm on this. Okay. Nabhaga, of the name Nabhaga. Disti Putra, the son of Dishta. Anya, another. Karmana, by occupation. Vaishyatam, the order of the Vaishyas. Achieved. Balandana, by the name Balandana. Sutta, son. Tasya, of him.
Vasapriti, by the name of Vasapriti.
Balandana, from Balandana.
Vasapriti,
From Vatsapriti. Sutta, the son. Pramshu was named Pramshu. Tatsutam, the son of him, Pramshu. Prachami was named Pramati. Vidu, you should understand. Kanitra was named Kanitra. From Pramati. Tasmat, from him, Kanitra. Chakshusha was named Chakshusha. Ata, thus, from Chakshusha. Vivimsati, the son named Vivimsati. Again, all together. Drishta had a son by the name Nabhaga. This Nabhaga, who was different from the Nabhaga described later, became a Vaishya by occupational duty. Son of Nabhaga was known as Balandana. The son of Balandana was Vatsapriti, and his son was named Pramshu. Pramshu's son was Pramata. Pramati's son was Kanitra. Kanitra's son was Chakshush, and his son was named Vivimshati. So there'll be a closed book exam after this on purport. From Manu, one son became a Kshatriya, another a Brahmana, and another a Vaishya. This confirms the statement by Narada Muni, Yasya la lakshanam proktam pumsho varna bivanjakam. Bhagavatam 7:11-35. One should always remember that Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas should never be regarded as members of a caste by birth. A Brahmana may be changed into a Kshatriya, and a Kshatriya into a Brahmana. Similarly, a Brahmana or Kshatriya may be changed into a Vaishya, and a Vaishya into a Brahmana or Kshatriya. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Chaturvarnyam maya shristam guna karma vibhagasaha. So one is a Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya, never by birth, but by quality. There is a great need of Brahmanas. Therefore, in the Krishna consciousness movement, we are trying to train some Brahmanas to guide human society. Because at present there is a scarcity of Brahmanas. The brain of human society is lost. Because practically everyone is Sudra, no one at the present moment can guide the members of society to the proper path by which to achieve perfection in life. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Staya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swamiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Prasachadesha Tarane Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yet Kripatam Aham Vande Shri Gurum Dinatarane. What was that word? Thank you, thank you. So here Srila Prabhupada's reiterating the statements of Narada Muni that our position in Varna is not determined by our birth, but rather by the qualities that are inherent in our nature. So, why is that important to us? Any takers? Why does that matter?
Because it gives us a chance to elevate ourselves.
Mm-hmm. How?
That like even if someone is born in by family, they're born in a, let's say, Vaishya, a family, but if they develop certain character traits, they can elevate themselves to the position of a Brahmana.
So you're saying that a Brahmana is a more elevated position than a Vaishya?
The Prabhupada said that they're trying to create more Brahmanas because nobody practically is in a position to guide the society. So if someone wants to be in that position, then they are able to do it. Not that they're elevated or less elevated, but if they want to be in that position.
Right, so if a person's capable of and exhibits the qualities of a Brahmana, then that can be very valuable to society, and they shouldn't be pigeonholed that, oh, you're just a Vaishya, you can't do this, right? So why is this ability necessary for each one of us? Like, why did Srila Prabhupada really want us to follow Varna Ashram?
Because we are all individuals and we are all born with a certain type of psychophysical nature. So if we act in that nature, it will be more harmonious and will not go against the flow and try to do anything that we are not meant to do. It's just like acting in your element.
Acting in your element. So when you can act in your element, how does that help you?
I think following, being in the element and following Varnashram Dharma also helps you to be to feel a little bit good about yourself. It's also a kind of self-care. So once you do that, it helps you to focus more on, as it's our duty, so first our thing is done, as well as it's a self-care. I personally believe. So it helps both the ways.
So how does that self-care help your advancement in Krishna consciousness?
Well, because it's very pleasing to Krishna when you do your duty. He says so many times in Gita. Actually, there's only 2 verses that are repeated twice. And one of them is better to do your duty improperly than to do somebody else's duty perfectly. For doing your own duty, you never incur sin. He says that twice.
And so when we're able to do our duty and feel peaceful, that helps us to be able to progress in our Krishna consciousness, because we don't have all these, impediments to engaging in Krishna service. It's quite interesting because I've been talking with a lot of you since we came here, and I heard from many of you that your parents wanted you to take a certain Varna, and it was hell. It just was not your nature. And so you became very unhappy having to try to make your livelihood in a profession that just isn't your nature because of some societal expectation. So you could imagine that if you're just stuck there by societal expectations, that would be very, I don't know, squelch your nature, and you wouldn't be able to exhibit your full authenticity. So we see that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he had a great variety of associates and participants in his movement. And each one of them was able to fully exhibit their potential in very authentic ways according to their nature. And so we see such differences. Like, for example, Haridas Thakur, he wasn't even born within the Varnashram system. He was born from a Muslim family. And somehow or other, just by his sincerity in chanting the holy names, his qualifications became much more than that of a Brahmana. So we read in Chaitanya Charitamrita that when Advaitacharya was doing a family ritual of offering pinda to honor his forefathers, after one does a ceremony, one's supposed to feed elevated brahmanas. And Advaitacharya, he chose the first person to receive the prasad was Haridas Thakur. So then there's the Brahmin community going, do you see that? And he just, stood up and said, what is the problem here? He is exhibiting more qualities of a Brahmana than any of you. Just look at what he has achieved. And so Advaitacharya, being also a manifestation of the Supreme Lord, was reiterating that it's our qualities, not our birth. And so, like I was explaining in the class the other day, how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and Bhaktivinoda Thakur, how they had to always fight off the opposition, that they were training people from all castes to perform Brahminical services and even just simply to engage in Vaishnava rituals and behaviors. And so it's always this uphill battle because we're so conditioned by our bodily identification and somehow or other wanting to be better than others as if that makes us better. So we've been talking in our seminars how it's not really an advantageous position to think ourselves better than someone else. Somehow or other that's just an illusion that makes you better. But we are all equal servants of Krishna. So we see that if we want to be able to embrace our authentic selves, it's really helpful if we have some encouragement to do that, instead of, no, you can't act like this, no, you can't act like this, you have to be like this, not like that. And it seems to be a continual uphill battle. And we get that even from our parents, that they want us to conform to some sort of family expectations or societal expectations. And so how are we going to find our natures? And since Srila Prabhupada mentioned in the mid-70s that he wanted the devotees to somehow develop Varnashram, it's been this mysterious topic that everybody has different opinions on. And we live in a community that is so-called developed in order to fulfill one of Prabhupada's desires of establishing Varn Ashram. And there are probably as many definitions and understandings of Varnashram as there are people in our community. So everybody has a different vision of what Varnashram is. And I like to keep things simple. My understanding of Varnashram is see what abilities Krishna gave you and use them in his service. Don't make it complicated, you know. And sometimes, though, Srila Prabhupada would request us to do a little bit more than we thought we could. And so, as Srila Prabhupada's mentioning in this purport, he saw the need for devotees to be learned in the scriptures so that they could perform that Brahminical service of guiding others. So Srila Prabhupada expected that of all of us to some degree. And that doesn't mean that everybody has to become this super learned pundit and, you know Shastras inside out, backwards, forwards, quote this and that. It just means that whatever we understand about Krishna consciousness, if we can somehow or other share that with others and help them in some way, and in that way, that's Brahminical. So we see that that was Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's often quoted verse that, Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagavan, no, not that one. Yeah. Just, utilize whatever you have for spreading Krishna consciousness. So in that way, Prabhupada wanted us to take that Brahminical role. So sometimes there would be discussions on Prabhupada setting up, say, a Varnashram college, and there was discussions on how he would train Vaishyas and train Kshatriyas and like that. And then some devotees thought, we're all supposed to go for the training in those things. And Srila Prabhupada said, no, the Vaishnava is above being a Brahman, a Kshatriya, a Vaishya, or a Sudra. They just have a specialty in one of those things because of their nature, and so they are the teachers to train the others. So we see that Dronacharya, he was a Brahmana, and he's out there, in the forest, teaching Arjuna how to shoot that arrow just right where he can get the eye of the bird, right? So he's a Brahmana. How come he knows so much about archery? Because he has that nature. But above that nature, he's able to have the compassion and the skill that he wants to help others develop their potential to their best ability. And so that's really the position of a Brahmana. And so Prabhupada says that the devotees, they're not really of any of these qualities, they are the teachers. Just like when we sweep the floor, Prabhupada would say, we're not sweepers. We're teaching others how to sweep the floor. And so one day, Srila Prabhupada, he was watching one of the devotees wash the floor with one bucket of water and, cloth, and was kind of getting dirtier and dirtier, and the floor wasn't coming so clean. Prabhupada says, no, you wash the floor like this. And he went and he got 2 buckets. And so he had the cloth, and he would, dip the cloth in the one bucket, and he would wash the floor, and then he would rinse it out in the other bucket. So one bucket stayed dirty, but the other bucket, the water was clean. So there was always clean water to wash the floor. And so Prabhupada's down on his hands and knees teaching somebody how to clean the floor. So that doesn't make Srila Prabhupada a Sudra, right? He's the Acharya, teaching us how to engage nicely in Krishna's service and how to do things well. So we can all utilize our propensities in the service of the Lord. And I've noticed that sometimes that's a progression. It's not that we only have one propensity. I can't remember the word Prabhupada used, but Prabhupada said, you may have a propensity by birth, And you may also have a propensity that you develop. So in that way, we can even change our propensities, maybe by seeing a need and going and learning something. And maybe it's just a natural progression throughout your life, that at one time you do something and then another time you do something else. So I see that in my life, I started out with some artistic abilities. And so when I first came to Krishna consciousness, I gravitated towards things in the deity department, you know. So I would sew for the deities and make all kinds of jewelry, and I just love making turbans, you know. So, and so I probably spent about, 10, 15 years sewing for the deities. And I would also, I have 2 daughters and a son, and so after one deity outfit was done, I would sew a nice dress for the kids. I have to say, my kids had the best dresses. And so I would notice over the years, though, that at first, I want to make this fancy dress for my kids and do something for the house and this and that. But the longer I engaged in sewing for the deities, the less I cared about doing it in a mundane way. So, one of my daughters had way better dresses than the other because I just got tired of making them, because I already utilized that nature that I had in the service of Krishna. So it was no longer pushing me to use it in a material way. So that propensity that push to use my propensities in a mundane way diminished, because I would utilize them in the service of the Lord. And so we see that that's the way in which we purify our natures, by using them in the service of the Lord. Then they don't force us to want to engage materially. So we may start out like that, but that's why we're supposed to utilize whatever we have, tendencies we have in Krishna's service, and that purifies them. And then you'll see when that gets purified, Krishna might give you something else. I used to be terrified to speak in front of people. But, gradually there's a need, and so you have something that you know, and you learn how to share it, and you get rid of some of your ums and your whatevers, and you progress. So that's really the purpose of Varnashram, is to purify our existence and be able to utilize whatever we have in the service of the Lord. And so here we see in these verses here that there's so many descendants of Vaivashvata Manu, and they all have their unique abilities, and they're all using them in the service of the Lord. And we see many of them are perfecting themselves and going back home, back to Godhead. So that's really the essence of Prabhupada wanting us to develop Varnashram, in that we purify our natures and go back home, back to Godhead. So does anybody have anything you...
Maybe I can add something that's kind of related to what we were talking about yesterday in terms of self-esteem and having healthy self-esteem, and we were describing how everyone has that innate self-esteem been created by Krishna, certain qualities, abilities, and talents, and that's who you are, and that's related to your environment, the natural propensity to engage in certain activities. We talked about the importance of healthy self-esteem and not getting trapped by these different substitutes for self-esteem. That can happen in one's quest for Varnashram, that one might think, well, I should become a Brahmin because then I'll get some self-esteem. People will think I'm advanced, they'll worship me, they'll tell a sannyasi, they'll worship the Lord. That's very false self-esteem, and many individuals who have that false substitute for self-esteem by trying to develop self-esteem by thinking they could elevate themselves to a Brahmin or sannyasi have great difficulties in their spiritual life, because at a certain point they really realize, well, that's not who I really am.
Yeah.
Able to maintain train their son as well. So it's extremely important to know your nature and be introspective and rush individual exercise today that can help us all kind of realize what our values are around ourselves as unique individuals.
Mm-hmm. It's true that Prabhupada once said that Varnashram isn't meant for one segment of the society lording it over the others, right?
So, let's say there's someone who is Brahminical by nature, but to maintain his family, he has to deal with business affairs. So he's acting like a Vaishya. So, yeah.
Srila Prabhupada said that if a Brahmin is not able to be maintained by society, then he should accept the duties of a Vaishya. He also, when a person does business, usually they're not employed by others, so they get to lead in some way. Sometimes you are, but Hitesh.
Please correct me if I'm incorrect, like mistaken, but I read somewhere that Srila Prabhupada said, like a Brahmana, it means expert, right? So if required, they could step into the role of a Kshatriya or a Vaishya.
Mm-hmm.
So has that been your experience in like the Varnashram society? Like if required, sometimes a Brahmana has to do other responsibilities and take those on.
Well, my experience in the Vaishnava society is that we're all somehow trying to get to be a Brahmin. I don't know if there's any of us that are. Huh?
In Krishna consciousness society, sometimes you have to do the needful.
Yeah. So like I was saying, that we all lead in whatever expertise we have, and in a way that's Brahminical. Mm-hmm. Prabhu, you had a point?
Thank you so much. Just wanted so I was thinking about this, like, especially in our society, a lot of devotees are talking about the need for Varnashrama and its importance, about how it has to be implemented in a way. So I was just confused about whether we use the realization of the Varna that we are in, for example, Pramod realizes that. Is that only for the service of Krishna in terms of our duties in the spiritual life, or also material life as well? So is that something I was thinking about as well? Like, again, adding on to this question, that, for example, someone may be a Brahmana, conducting Vedic sacrifices and must be preaching and doing deity worship and all, but to maintain his family, he might have to go out and work as let's say a Shudra, or as a Vaishya, for example, running his own business. So,
and then whatever you get from your profession, you utilize the results of that in the service of the Lord. So in that way, your profession is not really mundane, because you are using your livelihood to buy boga for the Lord, offer donations to the temple, give facilities for people in your family to become Vaishnavas. So we are going to be happier in life when we can utilize our propensities more. Sometimes we do have to work in things that aren't our propensity, and we see how hard that is. And so sometimes in those situations, we need to look and see how the situation is giving me some facility to make advancement in Krishna's service. And in that way, tough it out. And maybe when we have the right attitude, somehow or other Krishna can give us something that's a little bit more our nature. Because we see that in every field, there's different aspects of it. Like you can be in business and some people are in training, some people are in putting the nuts in the bolts, So there's a whole different aspect of it. And you might start out screwing the bolts in, but if your nature is more to lead, in a few years you may be like training others and managing and doing, PR or whatever. So there's facilities in many areas of life to use our propensities. And if we're a little bit patient and see where we want to go, then we can gravitate towards those things that are more in tune with our nature.
So just one follow-up.
Mhm.
Is there a certain stage in life when you realize that, or when you know that, oh, I'm more, here or there? So because Prabhupada talked about Varnashrama College. So is that program was Prabhupada thinking about, getting a program in which people realize where they belong and work towards that? Is that kind of the thing? And is that and what age category would you put that in, or what ashrama would you put that in, or what stage of life?
I think that, forget about my thoughts. Srila Prabhupada did say that one thing you could use astrology for was to help you ascertain your Varna. You also see that if you have different kids, you'll see that some just gravitate towards others. I noticed that when I was probably about grade 10, so I don't know how old you'd be, 17, 15 or something, I kind of knew where I wanted to go. But then, my association and my friendships led me in other ways. So maybe people have the realizations, I want to be a teacher, but then, so now I'm teaching. It took me a long time, but I thought it was no, I actually wanted to be a psychologist and a teacher. So here I am, 50 years later, finally getting around to that. So sometimes our path to developing our nature takes us a certain route that gives us the abilities that we need to perform that later. And some people are able to come to that sooner. So I think it's quite individual. And, anytime you want to do something, if you try to figure it all out, it's all overwhelming. Take a step. See where the next step leads you. Just start.
Do you know what some of those steps could be in figuring out if you do indeed need to work to have a livelihood, or if you could, livelihood depends on, what you're looking for from life, right? You could be making a certain amount and be sustainable, or we could just want more and more. But how do we figure out because I often get the advice to not be in full-time service of Krishna, not necessarily be in a temple life, because it's more beneficial to have a livelihood and be able to give back. So how would one decide which is better for their nature, or one is more suited to them? Just go about making that decision.
Well, sometimes life makes the decision for you because you, that's assuming that the temple life is going to support you. I've been through different things in life where the temple supported us and all of a sudden there isn't enough money and you have to go out and work. So sometimes that happens too. I guess you can try one and see if you're fully satisfied. And Srila Prabhupada also thought that. He thought, I should go out and work. And then I can make lots of money and then I can use it to spread Krishna consciousness. And he did that for a while and he was able to become a very learned person and offer a lot of service, even while being in the Grihastha life. And then somehow or other, Krishna took it all the way. So he said, okay, he wants me for full-time service.
And does this advice vary for men and women?
I think it varies according to the person who's giving you the advice. Oh, for Prabhupada, yeah. I think it's more, varies according to your actual nature, not man or woman. And you want to, what?
At some point, I have to comment on that relationship to Varnashram.
Go ahead. I'm floundering in the answer, go ahead.
Sometimes there's a little fear about Varnashram because we understand how the whole system became distorted, so it was one section of society exploiting the other section. And even there's a fear sometimes now in recent history that the concepts of Varnashram could be a little misused in ways that aren't really healthy for everyone's ultimate benefit. And in the history of ISKCON at one point, there was a group of leaders who decided it would be more Vedic and better for the society if all the women were put in some temples and all the men were put in other temples. And at one point they were actually even considering sending all the women devotees to Australia.
We missed out.
We took it through to Prabhupada at the Mayapur meetings one year, and the leaders were there, and this suggestion came out about sending the women to other temples. And Prabhupada started banging on his head and quoting the verse, Kiva Vipra, Kiva Nasi, Sudra Kemanaya, Ye Krishna Tata Devta Singh Guru. And they said he just quoted that verse about 10 times and said, don't you understand? And he just shut that whole idea down.
Don't understand that.
That anyone, whether he's a Brahmin, a Sudra, a Vaishya,
A man, a woman.
a man, a woman, if they know the science of Krishna, they can become a guru.
Yeah.
What's the verse?
Okay.
Kiva Vipra, Kiva Nasi, Sudra Kemanaya.
Based on that, I mean, I don't want to start the conversation right now, but do you know why in India women don't do deity worship if Prabhupada supported it?
In Prabhupada's temples?
Yeah.
Not in the bigger temples, because Srila Prabhupada saw that the societal expectations were such that if women did the puja in the Krishna Balaram temple, that all of Vrindavan and probably India would not recognize his temple as valid. And it was more important for him to get people to come and hear Krishna Katha than get stuck on that. And so, you know, sometimes there's a saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, in order to be accepted and to be able to preach. So he did that in order to be able to be more potent in the preaching. Not because he doesn't think that women are capable of doing Brahminical service. And so that's evidenced by the whole rest of ISKCON, that we all do it. And, you know, we see how beautiful our deity worship is because of the, you know, artistic ability, I think, of most of the women. And now the men have figured out how to do it too, so now we're all qualified. And you see that the deity dressing all over the world is following the standards of ISKCON now. It used to be just something like really simple, you know? And so it's what works. All right. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Vaishnava Sangha ki jai.